Nurse Dahlia Ramirez jolted upright at the sudden crash echoing through the tiny medical center's waiting room. Only moments earlier, the graveyard shift had lulled her into a contemplative calm, a routine night in Redwood Valley's scarcely populated clinic. Yet now, the quiet was shattered. Before Dahlia could fully process the noise, she found herself dashing toward reception, her heartbeat thrumming at a punishing tempo. What she saw was a sight that instantly triggered every bit of training she had ever received. A young boy, no older than 10, splayed out on the scuffed linoleum floor. His face was rapidly turning a mottled shade of red, and his breathing came in wheezing gasps. A frantic woman, presumably his mother, knelt beside him, her eyes brimming with fear. The boy clutched at his throat, eyes wide, as if he was trying to drink in the entire room, but couldn't inhale fast enough. Dahlia crouched beside him, adrenaline wiping away every trace of drowsiness. "Stay calm," she instructed, though she could see panic shining in the mother's eyes. "I'm Nurse Dahlia. Tell me, can he speak?" The mother's voice quavered. "He can't say anything. He can't breathe properly. Please help us." The boy's name, she gathered, was Noah. His mother explained in a trembling voice that they had just driven 5 hours from a family gathering in the countryside when Noah broke out in hives. He'd been fine one moment, then itching and coughing the next. By the time they reached Redwood Valley's clinic, his tongue felt thick and his lips began to swell. Dahlia's mind raced with the possible triggers: food allergens, insect stings, environmental factors. Redwood Valley was known for its wild flora. Sometimes visitors got stung by wasps or bees. Sometimes, too, they ate local baked goods containing unusual ingredients. She couldn't be sure, but the symptoms were textbook. She was fairly certain that Noah was having an intense allergic reaction, possibly anaphylaxis. Without a moment's hesitation, Dahlia directed the mother to step back. With surprising calm, she reached into the supply cabinet for an epinephrine auto-injector. She had done this before, though not many times. Redwood Valley's clinic rarely saw more than twisted ankles or the occasional fisherman with a nasty hook injury. But Dahlia had trained in a large urban hospital before transferring here, so the routine was second nature. Check airway, assess breathing, administer epinephrine if signs of anaphylaxis were present. The boy's eyes rolled upward for a moment, and Dahlia clenched her jaw. An invisible clock seemed to tick louder in her ears. She depressed the auto-injector into his thigh, counting off the seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her grip secure, her gaze fixed on the boy's reaction. When she pulled the injector away, for a second it felt like the entire world held its breath along with Noah. Several tense seconds passed before she noticed a tiny change. Noah's chest rose a little easier, and the frantic rattle in his breathing began to ease. Dahlia exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "There we go," she murmured under her breath. She shot a reassuring glance toward Noah's mother, whose tear-streaked face remained drawn tight with worry. "He's stabilizing, but we need to keep an eye on him. We'll take him to the back and prepare for any secondary reaction." She gently helped Noah onto a rolling gurney. The mother followed closely, her hands shaking. As Dahlia wheeled Noah into the next room, fluorescent lights buzzed above them. Noah's lips were still swollen, but his facial color was improving. The medical center was modest, with only 4 examination rooms. Dahlia guided them into the second room, flipping on the overhead light to illuminate the stark walls and a single rolling stool. She grabbed a stethoscope and pressed it lightly against Noah's chest. Airflow was still labored, but it was miles better than before. The mother introduced herself as Hannah. Over the pulse of Noah's still erratic breathing, Hannah explained the events leading up to the crisis. They had attended a relative's birthday party that evening. Noah, under the watchful eye of his father, had eaten a small slice of cake. Everyone assumed the cake was safe. It was apparently just a simple vanilla sheet cake. But soon after, Noah complained of itching in his throat. Because they lived several miles out, by the time they decided it was a serious problem, the nearest hospital seemed too far, so they settled for Redwood Valley's clinic, hoping for a quick remedy. Hannah looked around, desperate for reassurance in this unfamiliar place. Is he going to be okay? Dahlia kept her voice level. He's stable for the moment, but allergic reactions can be unpredictable. Let's keep him under observation. If he experiences a second wave, we may need additional medication. She took Noah's limp hand, giving it a light squeeze. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he stared at her in confusion and fear. She offered what she hoped was a calming smile. You're in good hands, Noah. We'll get you through this. A flicker of recognition crossed Noah's face, as though he realized this woman in the navy blue scrubs wasn't just any adult ordering him around. She was someone who understood precisely what was happening in his body. That flicker was all Dahlia needed to remember why she had chosen this life in the first place. Not for the endless charts or the antiseptic smell of the floors, but for the moment she saw fear recede from a child's eyes. Then she turned to Hannah. Could you think of anything else he might have eaten at that party? Or maybe something on the cake was unusual? Hannah's eyes widened. The only thing I recall is that my sister used a new frosting recipe. She mentioned adding almond extract to it. Could that be? Before she could finish, Dahlia's own suspicion crystallized. Tree nut allergies could be severe. Almond extract is sometimes strong enough to trigger a reaction. If no one realized Noah was at risk for that, it would explain the sudden onset. That could definitely be the culprit, Dahlia confirmed. We'll keep an eye on him for the next few hours and probably transfer him to a larger hospital for overnight observation. With that, Dahlia stepped out to ready in for drip, relief, and professional focus blending in her mind. She had performed the immediate intervention. Now came the vigilant watch, ensuring that the boy's reaction wouldn't explode into something worse. She didn't know yet that this evening, seemingly just another urgent case, would not only test her medical expertise, but also dredge up memories she had tried to keep buried. Memories that would challenge everything she thought she knew about compassion, resilience, and the very notion of healing. Because sometimes saving a life goes well beyond needles and medication. It sparks a deeper, more profound shift in the people who share those fleeting moments of crisis. Noah's eyelids fluttered erratically as he began to regain more conscious awareness, the medication helping keep his airways open. Despite the modest beeping of the heart monitor, the exam room now felt eerily quiet. Hannah had seated herself on a plastic chair nearby, her hands still trembling in her lap. Dahlia gently checked the flow, meticulously adjusting the rate to keep Noah hydrated and stable. Outside the narrow corridor window, the moon hung low, a pale coin in the inky sky. Redwood Valley never felt so still as it did in the deep hours past midnight. Dahlia could sense the hush of the town's small population, all asleep or lost in their own private realms, blissfully unaware that in this clinic, a young boy had just skirted the edge of danger. Hannah cleared her throat softly. I never thought something like this could happen. My sister baked the cake herself, so I just assumed it was safe. Her voice cracked at the end, laden with regret. We knew Noah was allergic to peanuts, but we always thought tree nuts were fine. Maybe we missed something. Maybe we should have tested him for everything. Dahlia paused from taking Noah's blood pressure. She recognized Hannah's expression instantly, a mother furious at herself for not anticipating the worst. Guilt was a powerful emotion she had seen countless times in her career. You can't blame yourself. Allergies can be unpredictable. Sometimes people react to something for the first time under the right or the wrong circumstances. The important thing is that you got him here in time. Hannah nodded but said nothing. Dahlia offered a small, sympathetic nod in return, then left the room to fetch a fresh blanket from the supply closet. The corridor's overhead bulbs buzzed like persistent insects, and a faint smell of antiseptic lingered. She passed by the empty reception desk, recalling how only an hour ago, the same space was a flurry of movement and alarm. Now it sat quiet, as if the drama of the evening had been swallowed by the hush of the night. Inside the closet, Dahlia couldn't help but reflect on her own childhood. Her own mother would have given anything to keep her safe. A flash of memory, Dahlia as a girl, feverish on a brittle straw mat in a remote village. her mother pacing anxiously, applying cloths to her forehead, praying for a traveling nurse or doctor to stop by. That was where Dahlia's dream of becoming a nurse had been born, in the haze of her own near disaster. She had vowed to be the person who arrived in time, who bore the knowledge and the skill to avert loss. In many ways, she was still that wide-eyed child, scared and hopeful, believing her role might stave off tragedy for someone else. She emerged from her thoughts and returned to Noah's side, gently draping the blanket over his legs. The boy stirred slightly, whimpering. It wasn't the whimper of pain, Dahlia guessed, but the soft, disoriented plea of someone who wanted the comfort of home. She delicately checked his foresight and found it still secure, no swelling or infiltration around the needle. "Mom," came Noah's faint whisper. Hannah leaned forward so quickly that the chair scraped the floor. "I'm here, sweetie." He squinted at the ceiling lights, voice raspy. Why can't I breathe normal?" Dahlia answered as gently as she could. "You had an allergic reaction. Your throat swelled up, making it hard for you to breathe. But we gave you medicine to help. You'll be okay if we monitor you." Noah's gaze flickered to Dahlia, then back to his mother. "I want to go home." "I know," Hannah whispered, brushing her son's hair back. "We'll get you home soon. We just need to make sure you're fully better first." Dahlia nodded. "We'll likely need to transfer you to the county hospital soon. They have a pediatric unit. But don't worry. I'll make all the arrangements so you can get there safely. For now, just rest." Noah nodded, exhaustion heavy on his features. Dahlia stepped back, allowing Hannah to have a moment with her son. Moments like these felt private, yet the quiet was reassuring. The crisis was no longer imminent. The boy would make it, Dahlia was nearly certain. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:27 a.m. Her shift was supposed to end at 4, and Nurse Mitchell would normally take over. Yet, Dahlia suspected she'd stay longer, or maybe she'd accompany Noah to the county hospital. She could hardly bear to break away after intervening so critically. Not that Redwood Valley's clinic had a large staff. On a typical night, it was Dahlia, one triage nurse, and a rotating on-call physician who was more often than not asleep in the back room. Tonight, that physician was Dr. Reuben Swift, a stoic, lanky man nearing retirement. Dahlia decided she should update him on Noah's progress. She found him half-dozing in the staff lounge, a medical journal open on his lap. The overhead fluorescent lights gave his skin a somewhat gray pallor, and a coffee mug half-filled with cold brew balanced precariously on the table next to him. He blinked awake as she approached. "How's our patient?" Dr. Swift asked. "Stabilizing," Dahlia reported. "He had a severe allergic reaction, likely anaphylaxis from almond extract. I administered epinephrine, started in 4, and his vitals are coming back into range. Oxygen saturation is up to 96% now, which is a good sign." Dr. Swift nodded, lips pursed in a mild approval that passed for enthusiasm in his stoic repertoire. "We should still arrange transport to the county hospital. They'll need to run tests, maybe get an allergist involved. But good work, Dahlia." Those 3 words, "good work, Dahlia," carried more weight than either of them acknowledged out loud. Dr. Swift wasn't one for compliments, but Dahlia had long since learned to interpret his minimalist statements. She offered a small nod in return. Arrangement for the transfer went surprisingly smoothly. The county hospital had a bed available in pediatrics, and given the condition of Redwood Valley's roads, the paramedics recommended waiting until dawn to make the drive. In severe weather or pitch-black darkness, ambulance rides along winding roads could be hazardous. Dahlia agreed. An hour or 2 of close monitoring here would do more good than taking unnecessary risks en route. She returned to find Hannah softly humming an old lullaby next to Noah, who had dozed off again. The notes drifted aimlessly, echoing with the quiet beep of the monitor. Dahlia hovered by the doorway, struck by a sense of déjà vu. She remembered her own mother once humming a similar tune in a makeshift clinic halfway across the globe. The memory felt comforting and jarring at the same time. Finally, Hannah looked up, her eyes grateful but filled with lingering fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't made it here in time." Dahlia approached, careful not to intrude on the mother's space. You both did everything right, she said softly. You didn't ignore the signs and got him the care he needed. I'm just glad I was here to help. They lapsed into a quiet moment, the shared relief so palpable it seemed to pulse in the air. In that instant, Dahlia realized something. She wasn't just treating a nameless patient. She was sharing a raw, vulnerable experience with a family, forging an unspoken bond in the face of danger. She wondered how many times that invisible thread had formed between her and the people she'd treated over the years. Each case was different, yet each carried the same fundamental hope: to pull someone back from the edge. Outside, the moon sank lower and the night stretched on. Within these sterile walls, life found a fragile hold. And for Nurse Dahlia Ramirez, that was reason enough to endure the next long hours until sunrise. By the time the first streaks of dawn gilded the horizon, Noah's condition had further improved. The swelling in his throat had gone down, his breathing was almost normal, and even the reddened blotches on his skin had started to fade. Dahlia attributed the improvement to the 4 steroids and antihistamines, as well as the adrenaline from the epinephrine that had kicked his system back into gear. Yet something nagged at Dahlia's mind as she bustled around the clinic, preparing discharge summaries for other routine cases. Redwood Valley was never exactly a hotbed of emergencies, but life had a way of presenting extraordinary moments at unassuming times. Part of her wondered if she should accompany Noah on the ambulance transfer. Dr. Swift had told her she was off the hook. Paramedics could manage everything from here, but she couldn't quite shake the tug of responsibility. She found herself standing at the supply station, restocking gauze and adhesive bandages, while her mind churned. Her shift had technically ended an hour ago, but she hadn't clocked out. Some silent part of her insisted she remain until she was certain Noah was safely on his way. An unexpected voice broke her reverie. "Nurse Dahlia?" It was Hannah, stepping hesitantly through the doorway. "Is there somewhere I can get coffee around here? I'm feeling she trailed off, pressing her lips together in exhaustion. Dahlia forced a reassuring smile. "The cafeteria is closed this early, but I can brew a pot in the staff lounge. Follow me." They strolled through the corridor, the overhead lights flickering against the soft glow seeping in from the windows. Once inside the staff lounge, Dahlia set about preparing the coffee maker, a battered appliance that had seen better days. While it sputtered and dripped, she pulled 2 white ceramic mugs from a cabinet. Hannah leaned against the wall, arms folded protectively. "He was so excited for that birthday party," she said softly. "My sister only sees him a few times a year, and she always tries to spoil him with treats. She swallowed, tears glimmering at the corner of her eyes. "I just can't believe how fast it all happened. One moment he's laughing, the next he can't breathe." Dahlia offered a gentle nod. "Allergies can be sneaky. Even with known allergies, new triggers can crop up, or sensitivities can intensify. The important thing is that he's here now, safe and improving." As the coffee maker finished its cycle, Dahlia poured 2 cups of steaming black coffee. She handed one to Hannah, who blew on it lightly, taking a cautious sip. Dahlia eyed her carefully, noting the fine lines of worry etched into her forehead. She recognized the quiet terror of a parent who nearly lost a child. It was a fear that would linger, likely altering the way Hannah saw the world. "Do you have family to support you?" Dahlia asked gently. "Someone who can meet you at the hospital?" Hannah shrugged. "Noah's father had to leave on a work trip last week, so it's just me right now. We live 2 towns over, but to be honest, we've been kind of isolated since my mom passed. Our extended family only gathers for things like birthdays or holidays. Everyone else is so scattered. My sister, Nadine, is probably still cleaning up after the party. She never even imagined we'd end up in the clinic." The staff lounge seemed far removed from the events of the night, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Dahlia thought about her own family, spread across the globe. She only saw them once a year if she was lucky. She understood that sense of isolation, that fierce determination to handle a crisis alone because there might not be anyone else. "I'm sure your sister will want to come see you both. Once Noah is settled in the hospital, you can call her. In the meantime, if you need anything, let me know." Dahlia took her first sip of coffee, the bitterness jolting her senses awake. A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. A paramedic in a crisp uniform poked his head inside. "We're ready to transfer the boy," he said. "We just got the okay from Dr. Swift." Hannah placed her coffee mug on the counter. "I'll go gather my bag." She glanced at Dahlia, an unspoken plea in her expression. "Thank you again." Without overthinking, Dahlia responded, "I'll come with you. Let me just grab my stuff." The paramedic frowned. "Oh, we can handle." Dahlia shook her head firmly. "I know, but he's still in a vulnerable state. I'd like to accompany him as attending nurse, if that's all right." She didn't mention that Redwood Valley's clinic was short-staffed for the day's shift. She'd figure that out later. Something in her gut told her she needed to see this through to offer some continuity of care for Noah. 10 minutes later, Dahlia and Hannah found themselves strapped into the back of an ambulance, its sirens still silent as they pulled onto the deserted main road. Sunlight now gilded the tops of the pine trees that lined the highway. Inside, Noah dozed fitfully on the stretcher, an oxygen mask perched loosely on his face. Dahlia gently checked the foredrip once more. His vitals had stabilized enough that the paramedics weren't running lights and sirens. But Dahlia remained alert, poised to jump into action if he suddenly deteriorated. Hannah watched her son with unblinking eyes, and in the hush of the ambulance's interior, Dahlia spoke quietly. "He'll be okay. The county hospital has a good pediatric ward. They'll do a full workup, figure out exactly what triggered this." She paused. "They might also recommend carrying an EpiPen at all times, just in case." Hannah nodded slowly, as if processing a new normal. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe." Her hand found Noah's, and she held it as though she could transfer her own strength into his fragile body. The ambulance wove along the winding roads, occasionally jostling them when it hit a pothole. Dahlia used her free hand to brace herself, her gaze never leaving Noah's form. Outside, the rising sun was painting the sky in pastel pinks and oranges. Each new hue felt like a quiet promise of hope, a new day, a second chance. Finally, the paramedic turned back from the driver's seat. "We'll be at the hospital in about 20 minutes, he announced. "Traffic's clear." Dahlia exhaled, that intangible weight of worry lifting slightly from her chest. The immediate danger had passed, but her mind buzzed with unanswered questions. She didn't know what she expected, some kind of resolution, maybe. But as the ambulance rumbled along, she understood that saving someone's life was often the start of a journey rather than the end. The real healing, emotional and physical, would unfold in the coming days or weeks. And in this moment, she was part of that larger story, bound to a mother and her son by the shared experience of crisis. She glanced at Hannah, whose expression carried a fragile mixture of relief and lingering fear. Dahlia recognized it as the face of someone who had stared disaster in the eye and emerged shaken but determined. In that reflection, Dahlia found an echo of herself, remembering the reasons she had become a nurse, not just to help bodies heal, but to remind frightened souls that they were not alone in the darkness. The ambulance took another bend in the road, the engine humming steadily. Dahlia reached for Noah's wrist, counting his pulse beneath her fingertips. Strong, steady. That was all she needed right now. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sunrise warmth through the windows wash over her face. This was why she had come to Redwood Valley, to be exactly where she was needed, even on the quiet nights that suddenly turned harrowing. Every second held purpose when a life teetered on the brink. Soon, they'd arrive at the county hospital. Paperwork, specialists, and hours of waiting still lay ahead. But Dahlia reminded herself that none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that Noah was breathing, safe, alive. And in that revelation, she felt a profound sense of gratitude that transcended the exhausted ache in her bones. After all, saving lives wasn't about glory or dramatics. It was about these quiet, determined acts of compassion, bridging the gap between danger and deliverance, between fear and hope. When they reached the county hospital, the hustle felt jarring. The emergency department was already bustling with staff, patients, and harried families. Uniformed nurses and doctors streaked through the corridors, the fluorescent lights reflecting off crisp white floors. Dahlia stepped out of the ambulance, helping the paramedics guide Noah's stretcher inside. Hannah hovered beside them, eyes darting from sign to sign, as though searching for direction in this unfamiliar maze. A pediatric resident named Dr. Kim greeted them. She was petite, quick on her feet, with a kind smile that belied her brisk efficiency. "We have a room ready for him," she said, checking the chart the paramedic handed over. "Allergic reaction, epinephrine administered, stable vitals. Let's get him in for observation and testing." Dahlia felt a sense of relief wash over her. From the moment they entered this larger facility, she noticed how everything was set up to handle critical pediatric cases. The bright mural on the walls, the child-sized exam chairs, and the staff trained specifically for young patients. She followed them into the pediatric wing, comforted by the knowledge that Noah was exactly where he needed to be. Dr. Kim continued her assessment, checking Noah's throat for residual swelling and ordering a round of blood tests. Dahlia took a step back, letting the hospital staff take the lead. She was only here in a supporting role now, though Hannah kept glancing her way as though to make sure Dahlia wasn't disappearing. "How's your breathing, buddy?" Dr. Kim asked Noah gently, sliding an oxygen sensor onto his finger. "Better," he croaked, voice still hoarse. Noah's eyes flicked over to Dahlia and Hannah, seeming to take comfort in their presence. Dahlia smiled encouragingly. He had been through so much in a short span, but children often showed remarkable resilience. She recalled her own early brushes with illness, how quickly she'd bounce back once the danger passed. Dr. Kim introduced a kind-looking nurse named Felicity, who helped settle Noah onto a bed in a private room. The walls bore colorful drawings from past pediatric patients, crayon renditions of smiling suns and waving stick figures. Dr. Kim turned to Hannah. "We'll run an allergy panel to confirm exactly what triggered this. In the meantime, we'd like to keep him for at least 24 hours. Allergic reactions can have a second phase, so it's best to be cautious." Hannah exhaled a shaky breath. "Whatever you need to do, we'll do it." With that, the doctors and nurses left the room to gather supplies, leaving Dahlia, Hannah, and Noah momentarily alone. Dahlia perched on a stool near the bed. The trip from Redwood Valley to here had been relatively calm, but adrenaline still coursed through her veins. An all-nighter with a crisis patient wasn't new to her, yet each situation carried its own emotional weight. Noah blinked around the room, still disoriented. "Am I staying here?" he asked softly. Hannah moved closer, smoothing a wrinkle in the bedsheet. "Just for a little while. They need to watch you and do some tests. But I'll be right by your side." Dahlia nodded. "You'll be in good hands, Noah. The nurses here are excellent." She paused, sensing that she was nearing the end of her role. Officially, Redwood Valley's clinic couldn't spare her any longer. She felt that subtle pull, the knowledge that she should return and resume her duties. Yet part of her hesitated to leave Hannah and Noah just yet. While they waited for Dr. Kim to return, Hannah broke the silence with a tentative question. "Dahlia, do you think you can stay? At least for a bit?" A swirl of conflicting emotions rose in Dahlia. She thought about Dr. Swift, the day shift at Redwood Valley, the other patients who might need her. Then she looked at Hannah, whose eyes spoke volumes about how comforted she felt by Dahlia's presence. Drawing a breath, Dahlia replied, "I can't stay indefinitely. I have responsibilities back at the clinic. But I'll wait until Noah's settled and we know for sure he's safe. Then I'll head back." She offered a small, compassionate smile. "But I promise, you're in excellent care here." Hannah's expression was both grateful and resigned. "I understand. You've done so much already. We'll be okay." When Dr. Kim returned, she explained the next steps, a regimen of steroids and antihistamines, plus observation in a dedicated pediatric bed. She asked Dahlia a few questions about the initial timing of the epinephrine and Noah's vitals back at the clinic, which Dahlia provided with precise recollection. Then Dr. Kim patted Dahlia on the shoulder. "You did everything right, nurse. You likely saved him from a much worse outcome." Dahlia merely nodded. Praise never felt comfortable. It was part of her job, after all. But deep down, she couldn't deny the surge of relief and fulfillment. This was the essence of why she had chosen nursing in the first place. An hour later, Noah was resting peacefully, and Hannah was discussing paperwork at the front desk. Dahlia used the moment to step outside the pediatric wing, letting the sanitized hospital air fill her lungs. She glanced down at her watch, nearly 10 in the morning. Outside, daylight shone brightly through the windows. Her own shift had ended hours ago. Every muscle in her body felt heavy, yet her spirit felt unexpectedly light. A soft voice cut through the corridor. "Excuse me, nurse?" It was Hannah, catching up to her with a flick of hurried footsteps. Her cheeks were flushed, either from fatigue or emotional strain. I wanted to say goodbye properly," she murmured, her gaze dropping. "And thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Dahlia slipped her hands into her scrub pockets, shaking her head. "You don't need to repay me. This is what we do. I'm just grateful we were in the right place at the right time." Hannah stepped forward, and for a moment, Dahlia thought she might hug her. Instead, she just reached out and lightly squeezed Dahlia's forearm. "Sometimes it's more than a job," she said softly. "You didn't have to come with us in the ambulance, but you did. Noah won't forget that." Moved by the sincerity in Hannah's eyes, Dahlia felt her throat tighten. In the swirl of professional detachment and everyday crises, a moment of real human connection was surprisingly potent. She exhaled softly. "Take good care of him, and make sure to follow up on everything Dr. Kim recommends. If you need anything at all, just call Redwood Valley's clinic. Ask for me, and they'll put you through." Hannah nodded, her lips curving into a tremulous smile. "I will." With that, Dahlia turned to go, resisting the urge to look back. She knew if she lingered too long, she might get caught in a deeper emotional entanglement that wouldn't help either of them move on. As she made her way down the corridor, the click of her shoes on the gleaming floor, she felt a mixture of relief, fatigue, and something akin to pride. Not the boastful kind, but the quiet sense of rightness that came from having done what she set out to do. Stepping outside, the late morning sun warmed her face. She took a deep breath, letting the outside air chase away the lingering scent of antiseptic. In her mind, she saw Noah's terrified eyes, then the moment relief washed over him after the epinephrine took hold. She replayed Hannah's desperate gratitude, the frenetic ambulance ride, the unspoken bond forged in crisis. She realized that she might never see them again. Life had a way of branching in separate directions after these urgent junctures. But that didn't dampen the significance of what had transpired. In the hush of Redwood Valley's clinic, in the swirling chaos of the ambulance, and now in the bright halls of the county hospital, a fragile life had been safeguarded. Dahlia looked at the parking lot, noticing her car in the distance. She'd have a long drive back, then probably a day's sleep to catch up on. Tomorrow would bring more patients, more unexpected moments, more calls for help. And she would be there, scrubs on, hair pulled back, heart open, ready to do it all again. Because sometimes being a nurse wasn't just a career, it was a calling. And if that calling meant saving a young boy's life in the stillness of night, then pulling herself through the next day on pure adrenaline and purpose, she would do it without regret. She smiled to herself, fishing for her keys. Down the line, she would recall this particular case, the fear in Noah's eyes, the unwavering love in Hannah's. It would stand out as one of those nights she truly made a difference. And in the quiet spaces of her memory, whenever doubt crept in, she'd remind herself of the night she and a frightened mother locked arms against the unthinkable, and the boy who lived, breathing hope into every future dawn. The end.